Good morning, interwebs, or afternoon, or evening, or whatever it may be at your end of the world. I'm Stefan Bollinger. Welcome to 10 from the Couch. Now, before we start, let me say thank you to Squarespace for their support of our show. Squarespace is a super easy and fast way to get your portfolio not just online, it's perfect for someone that rather is behind the camera than behind a computer screen. So give it a try, squarespace.com/couch, sign up for a free trial, no credit card needed. You'll be surprised of how easy and quick it really is. Now, 10 from the Couch is all about talking to the leaders in the industry, those that really know how it's done. And today's guest, well, he definitely belongs into exactly that group. He's not just a brilliant photographer and a Photoshop guru, he's the president of the National Association of Photoshop Professionals, NAPP. He's the head of the education hub, Kelby One. He's the publisher of Photoshop User magazine. He's a best-selling author. He's also a musician. He plays guitar and drums and keyboards. And before I completely run out of fingers, how about we just welcome him? He comes to us from the creative metropolis that is Tampa, Florida. Please welcome Mr. Scott Kelby.
Thank you, Stefan. Good to be here.
It's all my pleasure. Now, you're wearing so many different hats. I thought long and hard about what angle to take to jump into this conversation, and I thought probably the most appropriate would be to start with a thank you. A thank you for something that a lot of people take for granted these days, and that is the huge amount of content and tips and tricks and tutorials that you guys have provided for such a long time. And I'm thinking about the beginning when you guys started with Photoshop User TV. Actually, it was more Photoshop Radio, really, because you guys started as with an audio podcast.
Yeah.
But then as bandwidth just about allowed it, you really jumped onto the video thing and pushed it. And I mean, it must be hilarious for you guys to look back to those first episodes.
It's come a long way, we'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, as bandwidth grew, so of course did the production value and the sets and everything. But nevertheless, from day one till today, you guys helped so many people.
Well, the content, I think, was always good. The production was not so good. We tried to really, we were totally focused. Our daily job was teaching Photoshop and stuff like that. So, that we were totally immersed in that. And we, at that point, like you said, video was kind of early. And so we were, I don't want to say we were one of the pioneers, but, we were there fairly early in the curve. And so we didn't have the production value to back up the quality of training. But thankfully now, we've got a big video department. We have all these employees there, and they do a great job, great editors, great stats, wonderful camera gear, all switchers and all the stuff that we need. It's, we're very blessed that we have such a great team now, but it was just kind of us in the early days.
For a lot of people, the sheer idea of public speaking sends shivers down their spine. I guess worst case scenario for those would be in the spotlight on a stage in front of a live audience. You, however, you love it. You thrive on this. So where does that stage presence, that charisma, that confidence come from? Do you think that's rooted in your music days, or what has been your way onto the education stage?
Well, I mean, I used to be a full-time musician. So for many years growing up, that was my love. And I played in nightclubs for many, many years. And I think that's where I got comfortable speaking in front of an audience was from that. So I think that certainly helped. And so I grew up as a drummer. And then in high school, I switched to keyboards and played synthesizers and keyboards. And then on the side, my hobby still is today guitar. And so when I play with my band now, I play mostly guitar and a little bit of keyboards. And I even go back and play drums on one song. But So that's where that's kind of my background. But I still dabble in it. Once or twice a year we get together and play. So that's just fun, and it's for us, and we have a good time. But and so the other stuff just kind of, I'm old. When you're as old as I am, you wind up trying different things, and I wound up with the Photoshop stuff and the photography stuff. Got into photography because of my older brother who was into it, and he's a very good photographer and taught me a lot. And so that certainly helped. But it's just, just I do a lot of things, but none of them really, really well.
Yeah, I think you're doing all right. But a clever man once said, if we want to get things done, we have to surround ourselves with people who are as good or better than us.
Well, I surrounded myself with some very, very smart people. I mean, we've got some really brilliant. We have like 84 full-time employees. So I have a lot of help. I have a full-time photo assistant. I've got a full-time administrative assistant. I've got a lot of different people that help push this ball up the hill every day. So it lets me be able to do a lot of things. You know what the weird thing is? I think that a lot of people are surprised that I would say only 5% of my time is spent on photography. Literally, I'll go a month and not get to shoot at all sometimes. I may do 1 or 2 shoots a month. The only time where I do more is when either it's football season, where I shoot almost every Sunday. I shoot just once a week, just on Sunday, for 3 hours. So, 3 hours a week. I mean, seriously, in football season, I get to shoot 3 hours a week. That's the most I get to shoot all year long. So I think I think people picture me shooting all day long, like grabbing cameras and doing shoots. It's nothing like that. My life is a meeting. I spend my days every single day going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. Let's take today, for example. After this interview, I go to the office. I walk straight into my first meeting. I have an HR meeting. I've got an accounting meeting. Then we're actually going off-site to a separate place for a strategy meeting. Then we're coming back, and I've got afternoon meetings. I have a pre-production meeting for our show, The Grid. I have The Grid at 4 o'clock. I've got a dinner meeting, and I have a lunch meeting. It's like my whole day. That's what my day is. My day is go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting until I go home. There will be no photography today. There will be no photography tomorrow or the next day or the next day. I don't have a shoot planned for weeks. I did 2 in the last week, which is amazing. They just kind of got lucky. But unless I'm actually trying to shoot for a book, like, okay, I've got to show this technique and I have to shoot next Thursday. It's this much of my life is photography, and it drives me crazy. But when you're trying to run a business and teach people and move all this stuff, and I'm on the road doing my tour and all, when are you going to shoot? I shot after my last tour. I was in Phoenix a couple weeks ago, and I had to shoot between my flight home at midnight and the time the seminar ended at 5. I did 2 shoots, a portrait shoot and then a shoot with cars in a studio. That's when I squeeze in photography.
Well, I guess it's a sad reality, isn't it? I mean, your case is extreme, running so many different businesses, but even for us who make a main living with photography, it's quite similar. Sadly, it's quite similar. I mean, if I shoot 10 to 15% of my time, I had a good week. Most of it goes into business, marketing and sales and processing old jobs and getting new jobs. And the actual act of taking pictures is a very small percentage. Now, for people who know you as, of course, the manager and the educator and the Photoshop guru, they probably assume that was your way into photography, but that would be wrong, because you've been, together with your brother, you've been a photographer first.
Right. So I was a photographer first, thanks to my brother. He really got me into it, and he and I got really super into it. I had a small studio in my hometown, and it was fully outfitted. I had lights and the whole 9 yards. Back then, we had to live with a light meter and had hot lights and strobes and all this stuff. And I finally literally just got burned out on it. I got tired of it. I got sick of it. Now, these are the film days. Took all of my gear and put it up in the attic and didn't touch it until digital came along. In the meantime, my wife and I became graphic designers. We opened a small graphic design studio. I did graphic design for a living for many years. So it's pretty much that was my gig. I think I probably went at least 12 years maybe without really touching a camera. If I used a camera, it was a disposable point and shoot and throw it away when you're done. But as soon as I got my hands on a digital camera, it like reignited my passion for photography. But so I went from film photographer to graphic designer, making a living. That's how I made a living for many, many years. And then became a digital photographer. And that's where I am today.
So having worked as a graphic designer for a long time, how much do you think that understanding of negative space, leaving room for copy and logos, composition in a commercial way has influenced the way you take pictures today?
I think it's influenced it a lot because I've been told so many times by people, you have a real commercial look to your stuff, even when you're not shooting commercial. And I think it's because I compose that way. I really think like a designer, even though I'm a photographer. I always kind of think, well, it would be great to have the text over here. I will sometimes compose knowing I'm going to add something. But I do think it makes a difference. My brother always makes fun of me because he can look at any architectural shot I take and see, I knew that was your shot because I use so much negative space. You may just have a big giant blue sky in a little corner of a building. And he's like, that's a classic Scott Kelby shot right there. And I'm like, that's the designer in me coming out through photography. I like it. I because I like design. I love graphic design. I'm like type freak. I teach classes on typography to photographers. And things. So I like that side and I acknowledge it and I'm totally cool that I'm like, yeah, so the design comes out of my photography. I think it affects it a lot, but I'm cool with that.
Now, you mentioned that you're a type freak and that you love graphic design, obviously, and you worked as a graphic designer. And at some point you started teaching and it all went really well until you had this crazy idea of teaching design.
Yeah. Well, that's not exactly, it sounds bad. It sounds worse than it was. So I was already teaching Photoshop seminars. We were very successful doing Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator. So for years. And then we decided to do a design conference where we're not actually teaching the software. We're teaching the principles of design, how to work with color, how to lay out a page, how to lay out an ad. And there's a whole class just on how to design a print ad, like the fundamentals. These are for people that there was a time, I think, where people said, you know what? I don't really need to learn design. I just need to learn how to use PageMaker. And I think that's what the problem was. And so we went and did this tour, and the people that came to it absolutely loved it. It was one of our most successful tours ever from being able to teach something. But it was one of our biggest financial disasters ever because hardly anybody came. And so, you know, we actually would interview people that came to the seminar and said, "Why? We usually get 300 people for a seminar. Why are there 60 people here?" And they all pretty much said the same thing because the other people in our office said, "I already know PageMaker." They did not separate learning the software from being a graphic designer, right? They didn't understand. It's just like what in photography. We're so concerned about learning our camera. We're not concerned nearly as much about learning composition. Like we want to focus on the stuff that's easily controlled. I can learn what these menus do. I can learn what these buttons do. Then I'll be a better photographer rather than I need to study photography. I need to study shape and color and light and gesture and all these things that make photography. And so it was a very weird thing to experience that there was a very big disconnect between learning the software in people's minds and being a designer. They thought it was the same thing. Just like we would say with photography, is learning your camera, is that being a good photographer? Does that make great pictures, or does that make you know how to use you can take terrible pictures and know your camera inside out. So that's what the thing was about. That's why we did that. That's not because I was tired of seeing people, you know, do it wrong. But I thought here was an opportunity to fill in that gap. But what we realized is that's not what people really wanted. So we went back to teaching PageMaker and InDesign, fill up the room with 300 people. It's crazy, but that's how it was.
And the sad part is nothing has changed. Still today, I mean, how many people believe that they don't need a professional if their neighbor's son in the garage can do it because he got a lot of fonts and a lot of colors on his computer too?
Yeah, but what you're saying is right. Is like, it's like people think if you have the tools, then you're good to go. But obviously that's this happened to me with a client once. So when I was a graphic designer, one of my clients went out and he bought a computer and he bought the software. And he was an advertising agency. So what I did as a graphic designer, my wife and I worked together, and we primarily were a small graphic design agency for advertising agencies that could not afford to have their own in-house designers. So I worked for 7 or 8 different agencies, and it worked actually very well. But one day, this one guy, one of the agencies, gets a computer, gets PageMaker, and he comes in and he brings me this piece of paper, and he's like, "You got to see this." And he hands it to me. He goes, "I did this myself." And he's so excited. He's so thrilled. It was the worst thing you've ever seen. If I did it to him, he'd have fired me. But there's this I did self thing that makes you look at it and see it as something much better than it is. It was the worst thing. It looked like a ransom note. It was terrible. He used every font on his computer, and there was starbursts. It was just, seriously, if I had delivered this to him, it'd have been like, "Oh my God, what happened to you? Were you drinking?" But he was so excited that he did it himself that look, I did it, overrode the actual quality. And so it is a very real thing. And you're right. People will say, "Hey, my friend's got a camera and it's a nice camera, so they'll shoot your wedding." Instead of, let's get a wedding photographer that actually studies and knows, and then at the end of the day, people are disappointed with what they got, and they're always regret, "Oh, my wedding pictures, yeah, they're not very good. And we had a guy down the street." But how do you educate the public about that? It's very, very, very hard.
So let's talk about NAPP, the National Association of Photoshop Professionals, and Kelby Training. For a long time, these two entities were side by side, but not long ago, you combined them into one, Kelby One. What can you tell us about Kelby One?
Basically, we had 2 parts to our company, externally and internally. We had NAP, which is basically Photoshop and Lightroom training, and it was based on a magazine, Photoshop User Magazine, that comes out 10 times a year. So it's full magazine, 100 and something pages. And then a member website and community, lots of short, quick tutorials, help like Photoshop. We have a help desk, a gear desk, a Lightroom help desk. It's all about learning Photoshop and Lightroom. So that was that. On the other side is Kelby Training, which was really for photographers mostly. There was some graphic design, some video, but mostly for photographers. Do you hear that sound?
Yeah, I can hear it.
That is Maggie the Wonder Dog. Now, unfortunately, Maggie will now bark for 45 minutes solid. After this interview is concluded, Maggie will be barking all day. Okay, back to our story. So we had this other side of our company, which is really for photographers. It's online training, and these are full-length courses. And so what we decided to do was the people from NAP were saying, "Well, why don't we have access to all those courses?" And the people in Kelby Training are like, "We need to learn more Photoshop, more Lightroom." So we came to the idea that we really needed to just take the 2 of them together, make one single resource where everybody gets everything. So that's what we did.
So did this mean that you also had to restructure internally quite a bit?
Well, yeah. And that was the best thing. When I announced it to our staff that we were going to become one, they all cheered, because internally we were 2 different companies. You had people working just for NAP, people working just for Kelby Training. And even though we were all in the same 2 buildings, but different people do different things in different buildings, we weren't together doing one thing. And so we wanted to do it externally because it would make it easier for our customers. It would give them more. And then we wanted to do it internally because we wanted to be one. We just wanted to all be doing the same thing, doing it together. And so I think that has certainly helped us internally, and it's also helped us externally, because now everybody knows who we are and what we do, and so they just get everything. Everything's good. More is good.
Awesome. Well, Scott, let's have a short break and let's have a quick talk about Squarespace. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a photographer. I love to be behind the camera. I love to deal with people, create great images, and of course, great memories and all of that. And I'm excited. I come back to the studio, upload the images, I do a few tweaks, and that's where Squarespace comes into play. Pick one of those many, many designs that they have. Take your pictures, upload them. Type a few sentences, hit save. Your website is online. Done. So go to squarespace.com/couch. Sign up for a free account. Play around with it. You'll be surprised of how easy it is to set up your home in the cloud. Now back to Mr. Kelby, who by the way is on Squarespace as well. Let's put the business aside for a moment and talk about your private life a little bit. This year, which is awesome, you are celebrating 25 years of marriage to your beautiful wife, Calibra. Now, just between you and me, are you sure about that number? She doesn't look old enough to be married for that long.
Oh, I know. She's a miracle of science. I don't know how she does it. But it's her whole family. Her mom looks 15, 20 years younger. You know, her grandmother looked a fraction of her age. They've got some gene thing going on that keeps them young.
She has another talent that you mention quite often, and that is to spot the right ideas and the right people.
She does. She has a real eye for talent, and I give her a lot of the credit for our success because she's hired all the key positions in our company. She just knows. She's like, honey, that's the one. And she goes, you can go and meet him, but I'm telling you, that's the one. And I've gotten to this point where I'm like, hey, if that's the one, that's the one. You know, I mean, she's really got a great eye for, I think, and she would tell you, if she could have a job, like what her dream job would be talent scout. She loves making people's dreams come true, which is a wonderful quality. But yeah, she would love to be the person that says, look, I'll find your next actor, I'll find your next band, I'll find your next singer, I'll find your next whatever. She would love, that would be her dream job, was to be like, she would love to be like a judge on like American Idol or one of the, the shows where they have musicians and people, competing on stage, because she would love an opportunity to make somebody's dreams come true.
So Scott, let me try to add two things up for a moment. You have the beautiful wife and the children, the happy family. On the other side, you have a busy company where, as we heard before, meeting after meeting after meeting. Somewhere in between, you still manage to write new books miraculously. You prepare for seminars, you travel interstate to teach, and somehow you manage to keep everybody happy. What is the secret?
Well, I would say that I know that my life looks very different on the outside than it is on the inside. For example, if I told you how much vacation I took every year, you wouldn't believe it. I take a lot of vacation. I think last year I took 11 weeks vacation, which for an American, that's a lot of vacation. It's almost all with my family. It's either with my wife and I alone, because sometimes we want time where it's just us two, or we want the whole family there. And so we have places that we go as a family every year. And so what I do is I'm very, very lucky. So I have a huge advantage. Owning my own company and working 15 minutes from my office, I'm able to go to every single event in my children's school. If there's a parent-teacher conference, I'm there. If my daughter's in a performance, I'm there. If my son has a race on the weekends, I'm there. And so I get to go to everything. And I've been able to do this, as my own boss. That's one of the great things. Since I own the company, I can just tell my assistant, my son's got a game today at 3:30. So I'll mark out I won't be here from 3 o'clock on. And so I'm able to get to every single thing that they do. I get up every morning and I either take my son or my daughter. I have a 17-year-old son, big, giant, huge son. My brother calls him the wall. And then my 8-year-old daughter. And so my wife and I will get up with them in the morning, and I'll take one to the bus stop or the other to the bus stop, where we all go at the same time. And very often I'll pick them up. But I mean, right after work, I don't stay late at the office at all. I'm usually home by 5:30 at the latest. And And the kids are here. We have dinner together, or we meet someplace for dinner. We hang out. My son and I play quite a bit of game together. We're on Xbox Live, and we're very big fans of Call of Duty. And so, and my son and I were like best buddies. We hang out, we do things together. We're always together. So I spend a lot of time, and I'm home every weekend. Now, if I do have to travel someplace, they're either coming with me, or I try to get in and out the same day. Like if I do a seminar, right? I go in the night before, I do my seminar, and I come home that same night. I'm only gone for one night. And so it does get you a lot of red eye flights, but at least in the morning I get there and there's the kids and I see them off, so I see them, I think way more than you would think, because of taking so much time off and being able to just leave pretty much any time. I pick up my son a lot from school. I take him to school a lot. So yeah, I see my kids all the time. I bet I see my kids a lot more than most parents do, just because, being your own boss, you can, and knowing that if I leave, everything's still moving ahead. If I come home, if I do something, I've got 2 full-time assistants. I got great people. It's like the company comes to a halt when I leave. Believe me, they keep rolling along. So that's it. So I see them every day.
I think it's beautiful, and I think you do it exactly right. I mean, we creatives have that tendency of working long hours and still checking our emails at midnight, but it doesn't always produce the better results, and sometimes we just have to unplug, we have to walk away. And what better ways to recharge your batteries than with cuddles at home? I mean, that's just brilliant. And I honestly believe that this creates that additional positive energy that you bring into your next meeting next morning.
It does. It really does. And you have to recharge. And let me tell you something. I feel really blessed that I'm able to do that. I don't take it for granted. I would go to my son's school for something, or my daughter's school, and I'm like the only dad there. It's all moms. I'm not kidding you. It's all moms and me. Or there'll be one other dad, and there are kids where neither parent can come, and I feel terrible. There's nothing sadder than going to parent-teacher day or something, or some event or some play at the school, and neither parent is there for a kid. It's the most heartbreaking thing. And if my wife sees that kid, she takes her in. My wife's like, whoever it is, they're like, oh, come on over here and work with us and do this with us. And my wife she's wonderful with children. But I really feel, I can't tell you how blessed I feel that I have that kind of job, because it would be heartbreaking for me to know that my kid, we were late once, just late. We were just like 5 minutes late, and we walk in the door, and my little daughter, she's in kindergarten, and she's just crying. And you only have to do that one time. She didn't think we were coming. And I'm telling you what, we're the earliest parents. We're the first ones there now. Let me tell you, you only have to see that once. But I think it's, like you said, it's such an important thing. And it is where I get my happiness. I'm blessed with such a great family. And my son's 17 years old. And I swear he's just the greatest kid. He's such a good person. He's got such a good nature, and he's so compassionate, and he's hilarious, and he's just a ball. And he has such an impact on everybody he meets, from his teachers to I mean, if you met him, you'd go, what a great kid, because he's a great kid. And my daughter, she's 8 years old, and she's completely different than him, and she's amazing. It's hard to believe they came from the same parents, but she's just so full of life, and she's so happy, and she runs everywhere, and her hair's flowing in the wind. She's got her mom's hair, and it's just, oh my gosh, she's just a blast. And so, coming home is so much fun. And, I'm married to an amazing woman. You get the 3 of us together. It's like, this is where you want to be. It's like, it's as much fun as everything I do at work is. They are that whole next level of fun. So I feel really lucky that I'm able to juggle all those things and get where I need to get. And so, it's a blessing. I don't know what to say any other way.
So let's talk about your other love affair. And that, of course, is football. You love your football, and what better way to celebrate this than to shoot from the sidelines? Now, in every episode of 10 from the Couch, I pick 3 images where I like to dive in a little bit deeper. And in your case, it was a no-brainer which picture I would pick first. It had to be one of your football images, of course. So looking at this image, there's two things I would love you to elaborate on. Number one, just because you love something doesn't mean that you instantly have access to it, especially not when we talk about a major sporting event. So if you could talk about that a little bit, and also how you started to shoot for a wire service. And in regards to the photo itself, we have our hero coming out of the smoke into the arena. I guess what really works for me here is that it's not a typical action sports shot. It's less about the sport and it's much more about the emotion, that being up close and personal.
I'm not as close as it looks, number one. Of course, I'm using a long lens. But you know what? The reason why I shoot for a wire service is in American football, the sidelines are very, very tightly controlled. You just can't go, hey, I'm a photographer. I'd love to come and shoot a game. They're like, and no, it's very tightly controlled to actual legitimate media. And so I got to this point where if I wanted access to the games, I was going to have to shoot for somebody. And so I found a wire service and friends of mine that were shooting for, and I sent in the images that I had. I sent them 10 images to show, well, you know, I can shoot. And but I didn't want them to hire me because they recognized my name, and I'm sure they probably didn't. I never said, hey, I'm a writer, I'm an author, I teach Photoshop, nothing. I just said, hey, I'm down in Tampa, Florida. I'd love to cover some events for you. Here's some stuff I've shot. Let me know if I can, you know. And they invited me to fill out an application. And I went and filled out an application. I waited and waited and waited and waited and didn't hear anything and didn't hear anything. And then finally, okay, you're approved. You know, now that just said we may send some work your way, but the last couple of years I've had what's called a hard card, so I cover every home game of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is my home American NFL football team, and then a professional team, and so and I've been able to pick up and do other jobs for other teams during the year, which is great. But I did it because I love football. I'm a football fan. I mean, I'm here in my home office, and there's posters on the walls of, you know, my desktop background's football. You know, my phone, I don't have it on me. My case is of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I'm a football fan. What would be better than being a football fan than to be down on the field and to be able to then make your own pictures? The posters I have hanging in my room are my own photographs laid out as a graphic designer. As a poster. So I did it because I love the sport, and I loved looking at football pictures. You know, I would get Sports Illustrated magazine and I would open it up, and there's a section in the front called Leading Off where these amazing images are. And I'm like, I'd love to be able to make images like that. And so that's that. I did it for me. It doesn't pay worth a darn. It's a lot of work. You have to get to the stadium before anybody. While everybody else is having lunch, you're uploading images, you're tagging them and adding metadata and cropping and sharpening and doing all this garbage. And then after everyone leaves the stadium, you're the last one to leave because you're still there uploading images and trying to get this, you know. But if I wanted to get that kind of access, I would have to do that much work. Now, a lot of times, you know, going back to what we talked about as a parent, I will fly out in the morning, I will shoot the game, and fly home the very same day. I do that quite a bit. And that's why I don't shoot on the West Coast very often. If I shoot an East Coast team, like I shoot for the Atlanta Falcons and the Titans and things like that, I can get back and forth the same day. And if it's a day game, I'm set. I fly up in the morning, go have a great time, enjoy the game, get some shots, give them the images, get on a plane and come home. And so, but that's my hobby. Like, that's what I love is the sports photography and automotive photography. Those are the two things. You know, over my career, I've shot many things. And I think my main thing that I shoot is people. I shoot people. So that's why the image we're looking at, and you see it, even though it happened at a football game, that's a people shot. You know, you're seeing emotion, and you're seeing him, you know, come through this. And I spend, and it's going to sound silly, but I spend a lot of my time on the player introductions. I will set up to 5 remote cameras that I'm triggering on the field with wireless units to get that introduction, because there's so much emotion when they come out. It's a clean slate. There's no score. And so when they introduce them and they come running through, they're going to make a pose. They're going to do something. They're going to look up. They're going to do something memorable. And it's everybody around me is going to get the action shots. They're all going to get the shots on the field. You know what? I mean, think of this. All right. I'm sitting in the end zone with a 400 millimeter lens. You know who's beside me? Another guy with a 400 millimeter lens. You know who's beside him? Another guy with a 400, and another, and another, and another. So this gives me an angle to do something a little different. You have to get permission. You have to get extra access, and that's the hard part of it. Actually, putting up the remote cameras is not the hard part. It's getting the access to be able to put up remote cameras. That's hard. But once they give you the thumbs up, then it's actually trying to get the timing for that emotion. And so when you look at that picture, to me, it's one of my favorite pictures, because it freezes a moment that isn't action. It freezes a moment that is human emotion.
Now, the second image I selected goes into exactly that category, what you just said, that human element. It's a great portrait of a firefighter. When I looked through your portfolio, this was one of those images that instantly talked to me, and I knew I'm going to use it. And then, me being me, I tried to find out what it is that hooks me. And the longer I looked at it, the more I felt like as if it has a Joe McNally-ish quality to it. Now, you know Joe well, and I was wondering, being surrounded by masters like him, how much do you think that the style and the way they shoot is influencing the way you shoot?
I would say hugely. Now, you have to realize the story behind that shot. I'm the guest instructor at a Joe McNally workshop. We are down in the island of St. Lucia, and we're walking around. So we have the class, we've taken the class out, and I'm walking ahead. I turn the corner, and the gentleman in that picture, his name's Garvey, sees me and goes, "You're Scott Kelby. Oh my gosh, I watch your podcast and stuff, and I watch you and RC, and I've seen Joe McNally." And I go, "Joe McNally's right here." And Joe comes around the corner. I thought this guy was going to die, because we're in a tiny island in the Caribbean, right? And he's a firefighter. So anyway, we get there, and so we got to shoot him. He put all his gear on. All the guys in the fire department did. Joe did a group shot, and so I would say that I was highly. In fact, I got a picture of me, Joe, and him together. And so it's interesting. So when I'm around Joe, right, I'm trying to shoot like Joe. It's right. Everybody's dream, right? The guy's insane, right? So when I'm with Joe, I see myself shooting differently. Now that's a very tight end shot. That's my style. My style is I'm either one of two things. I'm either in tight or I'm way wide. I'm not in that middle range. And so I think while of course I'm shooting it with Joe in the same building, Joe would have shot him, I think, much wider. Joe likes to go wide, but here's Joe's thing. Joe goes wide, but then he pushes in tight. So you would see more background and stuff, which I think Joe is amazing at. In my case, that is my style, is to be in really tight. But yeah, as luck would have it, Joe is right there when I'm shooting the guy. And Joe keeps going back every year to that same firehouse, to that same guy, Garvey, when he takes a class down there and stuff. So yeah, it was when I'm around Joe, I try to shoot like Joe. I mean, I'm learning from him, even though I'm the guest instructor. I'm learning from him, and I'm watching him, and I'm putting my 24-70 on. Man, I never put my 24-70 on. That's my least favorite lens I own. But when you're around Joe, you just 24-70, one flash, here we go. It's just, you're so inspired by him that you wind up shooting like him. Now, let me make this clear. I don't shoot anywhere as good as Joe McNally, but you start shooting like his style. You shoot the wide, you shoot that. And this particular one, I had my 24-70 to 200, and I got in tight on him. And I like that shot quite a bit. But yeah, I tip my hat to Joe McNally every day. I've learned so much from him and continue to learn from him.
Now, the third image I selected, knowing that you love to travel and love to see the world, is this image here. Now, usually when we go to touristy places, we see more tourists than scenery. In this case, however, we have one soul in one of the most famous places on the planet. That instantly, being one person alone creates a narrative, it creates a story, and I wonder, who is that person? What can you tell us about this shot? And as a follow-up, you have a background as graphic designer and as photographer, so are you still able to let your hair down and just be a tourist and snap away? How do you approach travel photography these days?
Well, I think most of the time today I am carrying a DSLR with me, but I go really simple. I mean, I literally go one body, one lens, and that's it. I used to take it really, really seriously and carry all this stuff around and carry a big camera. But well, I'm seriously, when I land in a city, one body and one lens, I never change it. I use a 28 to 300. One body, that's it. I don't ever change it, ever, 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 no matter what. Pretty much that's it. I don't even take extra lenses because you know what I've learned? If I take two lenses, whichever lens I have on my camera is the wrong lens. So if I take a 28 to 300, I can go wide angle all the way in tight and I'm set. And so the story of that picture is it's taken obviously in the Forbidden City in Beijing, and I'm literally on a tour bus. So when I do travel photography, I don't fly to a city and set up camp and do it. I'm there with my wife and my kids and my friends. I'm on the tour bus like everybody else. And so, though I was the last person to get back to the tour bus, they had to wait on me. And my wife called me, like, honey, they're waiting on you. Everyone's on the 3 tour buses, but you. But so what happened was I saw a woman wheeling this guy, up where he was. And there's people everywhere. You're in the Forbidden City. There's thousands and thousands of people everywhere. So she wheels him up there and she's standing there. And I can see, wow, this would be a great picture if there was nobody there. And so literally, I just leaned against a wall and waited. And I thought, because she walked away for a moment, then she came back to him. She walked away for a moment and I thought, but there's always 2 or 3 people around. I thought, if I can just get it to where it's just him, it would make a great picture. And I waited and waited and waited. And literally, I had 1 second where she walked away and there was someone there and went, oh, click. And I got it. I'm looking. I got it. I tried to take a couple more just in case, so what, you take it quickly. You don't know if it's super sharp. And immediately people came back into the scene and they wheeled him away. So, but I just sat there and waited. And it was, I hate to say it was a lucky shot because I actually worked a little bit for it by waiting. And I think that's something, it's not one of those things where you walk by and go, oh, look, click. It was like, oh man, those people weren't there, and I got lucky that I got that 1-2 second opening to take the shot. But more often than not, Stefan, it happens where they never walk away. They're always in the way. This happened to me when I was in Paris shooting the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles. There was a guy that was in the frame that just wouldn't move. He's on his cell phone and he just wouldn't move out of the frame. And there's no way to make it look good with him there. And so my buddy went down and asked him to move.
I'm not sure if I believe in the luck. I mean, yes, we have to be lucky that certain things in front of us develop, but at the same time, if you don't have to eye for it, you will never ever see it. If you don't have the technical abilities, even if you see it, you will not be able to capture it. You have to have the right exposure and framing, and you have to have the patience sometimes to wait for it. So yes, lucky moments happen, but a shot like this, I'm not sure if I would call it luck.
Well, I think what it is it's actually called payback for all the times where they don't walk away, for all the times where, right, I think it's like this getting even is what it is, because more often than not, it doesn't happen. Now, I'm sitting there, I'm only looking through my viewfinder, right? So I'm sitting there I'm already composed. I'm already ready to go. I'm sitting there saying, come on, lady, please leave. Go to the left, go to the right. But it wasn't just her. There were other people in the frame too. And so I'm waiting. So all I had to do, honestly, once they walked away was press the button because it was already composed. It was already ready to go. You can even hear me saying it. Come on, lady, move out of the way. Go to the left, go to the left. Oh, there she goes. Click, So there was a little setup and stuff, but it's not a lucky picture. It's getting even. It's catching up for all the times where they don't move and all. So, but I feel very fortunate. That's one of my favorite pictures. and maybe it's more of my favorites because I worked it, because I had a plan, because sometimes you get lucky where you turn and something amazing's happening, you go click and you got it. But this one I had to work a little for and be patient. I was all ready. But I mean, the luck comes in is she could have easily just not have moved away. And she moved away at just the right time. It all came together. That happened to me in Stockholm, Sweden. It's graduation day. I'm walking home from this from being out all day with my brother shooting. And this is maybe 8 years ago. And it's graduation day in Stockholm. So all the kids that are graduating are riding around in trucks and old cars, and they're waving Swedish flags and all. And I'm walking back to my hotel. My camera's over my shoulder, so it's on my shoulder. And I'm walking, and up next to me pulls a 1949 red Buick Roadmaster convertible with kids in the back waving Swedish flags. It doesn't drive up to me in America. It drives up to me in Stockholm, Sweden. And I hold up my camera, I turn, and I have all this food here that I bought at this restaurant, and I get a shot, and it drives away. And it pulled up. I mean, that's lucky. And that picture wound up running as a 2-page spread in the Icon World magazine. And so you just never know, right? It drives up beside you. You're like, oh, come on. This is the last place I expected a classic American car to pull up. 1949 red Buick Roadmaster in Stockholm, Sweden. But again, it gets even for all the times that ugly cars pull up beside you.
Well, unfortunately, it's not just ugly cars. Anyway, now coming back to Kelby 1, you did a class together with Jay Maisel in New York, and he said something that fits perfectly in here. He said, you have to set the stage and the actors will come.
Right. Yeah. You pick a spot like in front of a colorful wall or something, and you just stay. And you're hoping that you're like, you have this red wall behind you. What you're hoping is someone's going to walk by in a yellow raincoat, and you just have to be there and be ready to take it. And Jay's a master at that.
Well, he definitely is. Now, some people at home probably wonder, why would a seasoned professional watch online photography classes? Don't you, after 20 years, have your aperture and shutter speed down? Yes, I do. I absolutely know what I'm doing. But that's not what it's about. It's those subtle things. It's having two great minds, Jay Maisel and Scott Kelby, walking the streets of Paris or New York and talking about how they see the world. In that conversation, there's those little gold nuggets, those little diamonds that once in a while just jump out, and you look at it and you go, wow, that's a brilliant saying, or that is a clever way of seeing it, or I never thought about explaining it this way. So there's just a never-ending learning curve. And I take my hat off, Scott. I mean, I loved those classes amongst many others on Kelby 1, but these three, the three classes that you've done with Jay, they were really quite something.
Yeah, Jay's amazing. And hey, I cannot tell you how nervous I was doing those, right? Because here you're walking with a living legend of photography. We walk out of his building and he looks at me, I'm not kidding, and says, this is only going to be as good as you are. If you ask good questions, I'll have good answers. But if you don't ask good questions, this is going nowhere. And I'm like, so I'm walking and I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I ask him something stupid? Because if you ask Jay something stupid, he'll tell you that's a stupid question. Jay's not one here. So, I mean, I'm walking around and I'm trying to concentrate and I'm trying to take a couple of shots. And so it's, but I'm nervous as anything. I'm trying to think because I'm there as the viewer's advocate. I'm there to pull this stuff out of Jay. I'm there. So the way I thought of doing it when I did this class was, if I'm watching this at home, what questions would I want to ask Jay? And I just tried to do that while I was there. And I think that's what my job was as host of it, because you're not learning anything from me. You're learning at my expense because he told me things about my own photography that made me just suicidal. But really, I'm there to move the class along and to pull things out of Jay. And, we did 3 of those classes. We did a day in New York, or a day with Jay Maisel, We did a class called Another Day with Jay Maisel, also in New York City, where we expanded and went bigger and longer. And then we did the week with Jay in Paris. And he's an amazing guy. And just like you said, you'll go 10 minutes, and he's kind of like, yeah, whatever. And all of a sudden he'll say something, and you're like, oh, that's what photography is really about. He really has the big picture of what photography is about. And that's why I think people have been so drawn to his class and to him as a photographer, is he gets the bigger sense and bigger purpose of, he doesn't ever talk about the camera settings. He's all about everything else. And that's what we don't get enough of. And I think he does it brilliantly well.
He absolutely does. Now, it all comes down to a very basic principle, doesn't it? If you have the technically best exposed and framed image of an absolutely boring subject, you might as well delete the photo straight away. But if you have an amazing subject, a beautiful person with a great expression, nobody cares about the exposure anymore.
Yeah, there's no call for perfect exposure. Let me ask you a question. You ever get a call from a client that says, you know what I'm really looking for? A photographer that makes my photo not too bright or not too dark. It sounds crazy, but what do we spend all our time worrying about, right? Exposure. Yeah, are you using spot metering? Are you using matrix metering? What kind of meter you use? Where are you metering the sky and all? That's not, no one's ever going to call you. They expect our exposure is going to be fine. They want something different from us. And I think that's what Jay does a great job of imparting to us, is the bigger picture and the bigger purpose of photography. And he does an amazing job. It was a great learning experience for me, you know. And that's the thing is, I've been very fortunate to be able to watch as many classes on Kelby Training as I want, right? Of course. But for example, I like Dave Black. I'm having dinner with Dave Black and Dave Black talks to me and says, you need to be shooting remote cameras. Why aren't you shooting remotes? I'm like, well, I don't know. I've never done one. Oh yeah, you got to do it. You got to do it. He didn't tell me how to do it. He didn't say, look, you need 2 pocket wizards and there's a cable that goes, but he said, you need to be doing this. And then I went and learned how to do it. Now, luckily I've even done classes on how to set up remotes now. But it was Dave Black pushing me in that direction that got me to do it. That's what Jay does in those classes. Jay goes, look, think this way, do this. Next time you're out, do this. Just like you said about the wall, waiting for the actors to come in. He does that. He pushes you down the trail of photography without necessarily telling you the camera settings or which cable to buy, but he pushes you mentally further in your photography by what he teaches. And I think that's why those classes are so great. He speaks to a part of photography that not many people can speak as eloquently as he does.
Absolutely. Now, one of the shows that you guys produce is called The Grid. And on The Grid, you mention it several times, how much you love to hold a big print in your hand, the impact of a big print. Now, these days, the whole world shoots digital, and 99.9% of all those images disappear on some hard drive or memory stick and are never seen again. Now, looking at images on an iPad or on a computer screen versus the print is obviously something you're very emotional about. Now, I have my personal view on this, but I'd love to hear from you first. What do you think is the current state of digital versus print?
Well, I would say this. I do think print is declining, but I think that the smart photographers know the impact of print. Let me tell you what, if you've never given someone a large print, you need to have a camera on them when you hand it to them, because the impact of giving someone a print, I don't care what it looks like on your iPad. I don't care what it looks like on your screen. It's not real. It's inside of something else. But when you hand someone a print, I hate to say it, it's magic. It has an impact that you cannot get any other way. I don't care how big your computer screen is. The impact that you get when you hold a print, there's nothing like it. And I know, and I feel badly. And you know what? I'm not old school. This is not, I wouldn't, if I was teaching, I wouldn't teach the darkroom. I don't believe these old school techniques. This isn't about old school. This is about impact. You hand someone a print, it has value. It's real. You can feel it, and you watch when you hand somebody a print. They move their fingers on it. They're like, ooh, they feel it, that tactile feel. It's important to us as humans. We are now experiencing your print at a different level. There is a smell to the paper. There is a feel to the paper. There is the look at the paper. It takes your senses to another level of enjoyment and experience and impact. And what I would tell the new photographers are, you need to go make some prints, because it's just, there's no way to, it's like trying to describe the color blue to someone that's blind. How do you do it? It's an intrinsic value that is very, very hard to translate until you hold it in your hands. You hold that big, and I would say 16 by 20 or bigger. Hold it in your hands and you'll be printing the rest of your life. It's that important. And when you give a print as a gift, emailing a photo has zero value. I don't care how pretty the photo is. Sending someone a rolled up print in a tube changes everything. They will follow you around like a puppy for the rest of their life, because it's personal. It's a very personal, it's a very intimate thing. The print is it's still king.
Now there's another reason why I do prints. These days it makes sense. Clients want files.
Sure.
Right? They need to hand it over to their graphic department. They need it for their website, for advertising, for social media. So they shall get their digital files. But I will make sure that they will get a print anyway. Now, they didn't order it. They didn't want it. They didn't pay for it. But they will get it anyway. Why? Because it has so much impact.
Yeah.
But there's actually more to it. People always ask, what are good sales strategies? What are good marketing strategies for us photographers? Well, here is an opportunity that is staring into people's faces and they don't take it. Why? Well, this photograph has a lot of things going for it. Number one, it has come out of a collaboration between the client and you. It depicts something that is important to the business, otherwise they wouldn't have engaged you in the first place. It is large, it has impact. This is a piece of value, so it will not be thrown away.
Yeah.
However, be it so big, it also takes a lot of space on the desk. And after a day or two, it becomes annoying to be here. So it most probably will be upgraded onto a wall. Now you just achieved two major advantages. Number one, you, in the way people see you, have changed from a simple service provider to an artist. And your simple business delivery has turned into a conversation piece. Every single time your client picks up the phone and looks around the room while he's talking, he will look at what? Your picture. Every single time he has meetings and guests over and they talk and they look around, what do they look at? Your work. There's a very high chance that if that client or one of his associates ever needs a photographer, that you most probably will get the phone call. So try to do that with an iPad. There is some power in the print. And that's why I print, even though the client didn't ask for it.
Dude, that's brilliant. That. I hope your viewers take that from you. That's the golden nugget from this. That's a great idea. That's wonderful. And you know what? I don't do it. I send like prints as gifts and stuff. But when I do a client, I just did a client job a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to go ahead and send him a tube with a big print. He didn't pay for it, but he'll remember it. I know the power of the print. That's great. I'm stealing your thing. I love it.
Go for it. Now, what advice would you have for all the beginning photographers or those who think about going professional?
Well, I think today, because so many people are capable of making a good shot today, more than any time in history. And there is definitely a problem with supply and demand. There are a ton of photographers, but there's only this many people willing to pay them, right? So I think that if I had to give any advice to a photographer is, you're going to have to create your own trademark look. a look that you can repeat again and again and again. Because when I look at a photographer and they have all these different shots, all these different looks, if I hire you, which photographer am I getting? As a client, I need to know, I want that look, and this guy does it every time. You know, when you get a Joe McNally shot, you know it's a Joe McNally shot. Even when other people take McNally shots, you know, like obviously you even said, hey, this looks very McNally inspired. Well, yeah, it is, you know. I think that Joe, if you hire Joe, you know what you're going to get. And I think that's a really important distinction. I think that I would tell a photographer, I need to know as a client, if I hire you, what I'm going to get. It's got to be consistent. I have to look at it and know that, yep, that's what I want. Because they're looking at your portfolio. Picture a wedding photographer. They're looking at the beautiful shots you have on your picture. Do they want a shot that's nothing like with that? No, they want a shot just like that. That's your job. That's your job right there. You know, it's like if you look at your portfolio and that's what you produce, I want something that looks like that. That's why I hired you. Don't give me something else. Don't change the lighting. I hired you to get that. You need to, I don't know, your look can come from how you compose, your lens selection, how you expose. It can be a number of things, or it can be a lot of post-processing, what you do to your images after the fact. But I got to know who I'm getting when I hire you. That's the advice that I would give them. You're talking a lot about standing out. How do you stand out from the pack? You got to have your signature look, and you have to be able to reproduce it consistently.
Great advice. Now, Scott, I know you and we could easily go on for another 2 hours.
Good.
But at some point, we just have to bring it to a close. So let me just say thank you so much for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Absolutely my pleasure. I really, really enjoyed talking to you.
So while you try to catch up with your day, I probably better be off for a good shave. And I hope all our viewers don't forget to click that little subscribe button so that you never miss a future episode. Talking about our next upcoming episode, we'll be back with a shebang. I will make sure that I will get my squinch under control and work on my jawline. Until then, danke fürs Zuschauen und bis bald.
That's a way to get it done there, buddy. Good job.
Shebang!